This is Tuesday Morning Grind, episode number 14, and today we have the legend, Mike Weber. Mike is a security leader and penetration tester with about 20 years of experience. He's the former VP of Coalfire Labs and helped take that business from about 4 to about 100 people. A lot of certifications to your name that I won't go on and list. Past speaker at RSA Conference, Black Hat, Cloud Security Alliance, and many more. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for being here, man. I'm excited.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me on.
So I've talked to a couple of my teammates, and they're pretty pumped that you're joining us today. And I think we just wanted to start off, man. I want to hear your story. Like, you've had a pretty cool ride, becoming a pen tester, leading a practice, and now kind of going off and doing the next thing. So, could you start off with maybe just some of your story, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So, how I got to the path of how I got to where I am today,
Yeah.
it's not much of a path. So, ultimately, geez, if you want to go way back, it started back in the 70s, like the late 70s and early 80s, really, as a geek kid who was just into computers and cars and that sort of thing. Um, then, college came around and I decided that being a rock star was a lot cooler than being a mechanical engineer. So I pursued that path for a while, but to fast forward a bunch of years there, um, my first job in IT was ultimately a result of developing some software that was a needs-based issue. Addressed that, ended up getting the attention of some people in the organization, got a job in IT. And then my next the way I got into security was pretty much understanding that there was an opportunity to be able to use development skills for security, and that was pretty much the coolest thing I'd ever heard of. It's like, wait a minute, I can go hack
Yeah.
software because of just because anybody can do it, and that was the case. So I started down the path of as a security analyst, working network security at Rocky Flats, the bomb plant here in Golden, Colorado. So starting with some pretty high security bar and then working it from there. After there, I became a consultant, and here I am.
Was there a time in your career when you realized, okay, security is going to be a thing? Because it's like at first it's IT or it's maybe network administration or something. Was there kind of a pivot where you had an epiphany or anything where you're like, okay, security is a career for me and this is important?
There was. So it's kind of a combination of things. I was working for a company that made basically middleware and terminal emulation products for PIC style multi-value databases. Very niche company. And
Yeah,
when we were working with it, troubleshooting whether the connection is working or not, just sniffing traffic, being able to watch the credentials go across in clear text. I was like, seriously? And this is like 1990, what, eight? At the time, I'm like, this is awesome. I can't, and that's what got me interested in security. Then getting the job as a network analyst, realizing that I can actually do what I want to do in security and just drive that because it was so cool being able to, uh, basically think yourself out of a puzzle from a
yeah,
troubleshooting perspective. Then the security thing just raised its head, and it's like, wow, this is a good marriage of two really neat things.
yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'm personally and selfishly interested in is like you grew a pretty significant pen test practice while you were at Coalfire, from 4 to 100, probably one of the larger dedicated pen testing practices in the country. When you took that job, and I guess there were 4 or 5 of you, it sounded like it was a pretty small team. Did you have a vision for that growing the way it did, or were you like, where was your head at when you were ready to grow that and had that opportunity?
Well, it's a funny question, right? Vision or dream, right? I mean, it's kind of a dream. I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
I'd been in security and security consulting for a while, doing, security assessments, risk assessments, penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, just the gamut of everything you do as a consultant.
yep,
And knowing what I wanted to do, I wanted to be one of those revered companies at the time that was a leader in the industry, basically a thought leader in information security. And that's where I wanted to get. But I started with an organization that had 4 people, 4 individuals in the offensive security team that we called Labs, and quickly burnt that down to one person, and then built it back up. And I tell you, it was 2011 when I took over that team, and being able to build that team at that rate over basically 9 years, organically for the most part. It's it's a challenge. It's a challenge to be able to keep onboarding individuals with those skills, because
Yeah.
the vision that I had of being the industry leader, right? It's the ultimately to get to the top of the heap. And to do that, I mean, you can't just hire absolutely everybody, right? There's a process of being able to find that right candidate, be able to grow that candidate, to get to where we need to go. So it was a challenge. I mean, it was the most dynamic environment I've ever been in, really.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I know one of the problems or challenges that we have at Risk 360 is, there's a shortage of talent out there in security, and it's high demand. Everybody wants the
Yeah.
best people. So, and most of these really good security practitioners have their pick of where they could go. And then you have to bring them in the door, and there's challenges with pen testers as far as just like, maintaining that hacker ethos, if I can say that. What was your like method, or how did you get good folks in the door and then kind of retain them, keep them over the long haul?
So there's a difference between in that offensive security side, right? There's a
Yeah.
mindset that you need to be able to be a successful offensive security person, either a pen tester, red team, or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's not something that's traditionally by the book, right? It's generally it's outside the box. It's against the book. It's the opposite of what people teach you. Well, in theory, actually, even linguistically, it's reverse engineering, right? It's not engineering, which is
Yeah.
what gets taught.
There's
So
some
being able to
anarchy in this.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, being able to find those individuals who have the excitement and the creativity, but still have the operational experience, because
Hmm.
on that engineering side, you can't really, you're not going to be an effective reverse engineer unless you know the concepts of engineering it in the first place. So being able to find that combination is really tough. So looking for those kinds of individuals, you're looking for people who think outside the box, people who are questioning everything they see. They already have a basis. They're a puzzle solver. They're they have that level of creativity. Um, that comes with those things that you're talking about, which is a bit of subversiveness, a
Yeah.
little bit of
Hmm.
anarchy, and embracing that um, is was one of the things I did early on. Right, instead of we would allow people to be able to explore their own creativity. Um, our organization operated a little bit differently than the rest of the company. The rest of the company was very audit driven, right? And if you think of auditors and you think of a pen tester, they
Yep.
are opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yep.
And that's the culture we embraced, right? It was a little bit like pirates and whatnot. It was in comparison.
Yeah.
That's sort of a silly analogy, but that's sort of the feel that we had.
Did you guys have recruiters seeking, or was it like very organic where you were like, you know, on Discord servers meeting people and they were just attracted to labs, or what was the process to actually find and vet people?
Well, there certainly was a who you know, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of sifting through, through people who were well qualified to do things, but may not have had that right mindset. We did grow ourselves a recruiting team. Um, it was pretty effective, but it's still an uphill climb,
Hmm.
because it's a lot harder to put on paper that mindset.
Oh yeah.
The hacker mindset, it's like, oh, what's your qualifications? Oh, it's a hacker mindset. It's right here. Yeah, I've got a certificate in hacker mindset. I mean, that's just something that doesn't really exist. So
Yeah.
working with a recruiter, it's tough to be able to handle their frustration by not being able to source correct candidates over time.
Yeah. Is there stuff that you look for that outside the technical stuff and certifications? Are there like certain attributes that you can kind of just tell, okay, this is going to be a great candidate? Because I guess there's also a difference, because in industry, you kind of have a security analyst, someone who might be, a security operations center behind a screen. They can really get in deep on the technical side. They can be introverted and, as much as they want. Whereas pen testing on the consulting side's a unique beast, because you're almost looking for a unicorn. You're looking for someone who can
Totally.
communicate, that can interact with the client, has at least some amount of ability to articulate, and they also have to be probably the best technical person in the room too. So it's really hard to find those kind of individuals. Are there things that you were looking out for, like during the interview process or anything that you just kind of knew that person was going to be great?
Well, from a background perspective, I'm a huge fan of developers, and that might have to have that
Yep.
has a little bias on what my background looks like, because that's what I first got into when I got into IT. But
Yep.
um, looking at what those types of skills are and what you can tell, it's really about what they do from a creative perspective. Do they make things? Do they build things? Do they solve their own problems with code? And that's something that really makes people successful. There are really really smart, yeah, I'm going to say sysadmins, even though it's a deprecated term I think nowadays, but there are some really smart engineers and sysadmins that
Hmm.
that understand what they're doing, but there's if they're not someone who scripts themselves or automates their way through making their life better, right? That's going to be one of those things that is it's a detractor, right? I'm looking for people who are I typically am looking for people who want to make themselves better through automation and coding, and that's
Yep.
usually what we end up with somebody who has the right mindset for pen testing. One of the questions I always ask people in interviews is, what's on their GitHub, right? What have you
Yeah.
got? If the answer is nothing, it's like okay, that's definitely a step backwards. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that people can't make it that way, but being able to showcase creativity is huge.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. That's what we look for too. That mix of like creativity and technical acumen. Like folks who are building stuff have, one of our engineers that turned out to be a kind of great pen tester built like a NFL, like a scoring thing where they were calculating all the scores and kind of had a NFL thing. And I was looking at it, I was like, well, this is awesome, but this is also something you just did because you wanted to and you're curious about it, and you can just kind of know that person is going to be pretty solid because they're
Yeah,
a tinker.
totally.
So shifting gears just a little bit. Um, so recruiting, pen testing. Eventually, you grew the organization to 100 or so people, where you no longer had span of control. You probably knew everybody by name, I'd imagine, but it was probably just
Yeah.
barely. Um, as a leader of an organization, what's that dynamic for? Like if you're a CISO or if you're a practice leader of 100 pen testers, like how does your focus shift from, maybe early on you were a practitioner, later on you're a manager and a leader of people? What were some of those things you were focusing on at that level?
Right. Well, I tell you, in a professional services company, there's a lot of dealing with spreadsheets, right? There's a lot of dealing with numbers and spreadsheets and
Yep.
marketing and product positioning and all these other things that are really cool. But boy, that isn't why I got into security, right? So there was a personal shift. It's like, what do I
Yep.
want to do? What do I want to do with myself? Do I want to be the best hacker in the world, which I was never cut out to do? But I had hopes and aspirations. Do I want to do that, or do I want to motivate and drive a team? And
Yep.
motivating and driving a team really was more suited for my skill sets. Let's put it that way. Um, and being able to do that was a decision point for sure in my career. In fact, I have a boss, Mike Bearfield. I'll give him a shout out. Mike Bearfield told me once. He said, "Hey, you kind of got to make a decision. Do you want to run the team, or do you want to be the best guy on it?" I'm like,
Yeah. Yep.
"Good point." Yeah. So that was a big step for me, and being able to take that step and being able to move forward with it really helped me see where I was going to go instead of being sucked down into the geekery, because that's fun. I mean, it's all fun stuff.
Yep.
I I still do. I have job envy every day from the cool stuff these guys get to do, because there's a lot of
Yep.
cool stuff we did when we were there, and still get to do. But looking at it and understanding how to get through the organizational dynamics. First, there's the teaming of the high-end engineers and being able to understand the care and feeding of that. And then it's the care and feeding of the leads of the teams of the high-end engineers. And then it's the leads of multiple leads. So I've got, a couple layers where I got to. And, when we were at that size, and it still is, um, it's a whole different thing to run and manage. Instead of being a security practitioner and helping, an organization, but myself, it's the organization helping an organization, and it's a different relationship. It's a lot different, and it grew. It grew. It grew. It's kind of hard to really explain, as you can tell, as I stutter, how it's a completely different lifestyle
Yeah.
that I have now than I had 10 years ago when starting that
Hmm.
team.
I know one thing I read recently from, I think, like Y Combinator or something, that was relevant to our journey, but probably relevant to yours as they grew. And they're like, there's two things that leaders can't delegate. You can't delegate the mission and the vision, and you can't delegate hiring top managers. And I've found, for me, trying to run an organization, that's pretty true. Like every day, I have to pound the drum on the mission and the vision, and, like, the strategic roadmap, where we're going, the why behind all of this. And then the faster we grow, the more I find that, like, hiring top managers and really good people who are on board with the culture and also have the vision and can develop others becomes more and more my job. And that's at the company level. Was that true for you? Like, just running a large practice?
Oh yeah, well you're just picking on two things I screwed up pretty royally at certain points. I don't know if I want to talk about that, but yeah, the having the vision and the mission and being seeing where the future is going to go. Right, I knew what I
Yeah.
wanted to do and I knew what I wanted to be when I got there. It took a while, but we were able to build that team. Building that team is an uphill battle when you're in a professional services only company, right? There are no software sales, there's no product sales to be able to support it. It is
People.
literally all selling the services of people and making the investments to be able to grow those and to become that top leaders is pretty hard to do. So seeing that vision, understanding it, I did not communicate what I wanted to be or where I wanted to be in the right terms, in business terms. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that is huge, right? Understanding that it's, how does this benefit the business? Not just from an altruistic, oh, well, we'll be the best, and the best is always the best. Well, it's not true. You gotta break it down when communicating these things and being able to drive your vision. I think I would have made progress a lot quicker had I done that.
Yep.
Um, the other one, which is hiring the right managers. So historically speaking, not only in every organization I've been in, I don't want to I definitely don't want to talk bad about anybody here, but um, every IT company that I've seen, customers that I've worked at or whatever, we've taken some of the best and brightest minds and promote them into management positions.
Yep.
And they may not be the right mind for a management position. They may not they don't want to do it, right? It's never about um, where we can take that individual. It's about, oh, that's the best person. They're going to be the team lead and they're going to be able to lead it and manage it and deal with the people issues and all those other things. But that's not true. And we have failed a lot of times. There's a guy who a person I still talk to quite with reasonable frequency that is somebody who left because they didn't want to take that step and be in that position of management. Although it was a very logical thing for us at the time. That was a huge learning point in
Mhm.
my career as well. That you don't necessarily need to have the lead dog, be the manager.
Yeah, security is interesting in the phenomena that exists. Have you ever heard of the Peter principle, that
Yeah.
people rise to their level of incompetence? So I feel like
Yep.
that's rampant in security, because traditionally what you do, really in consulting in general, is the people who get promoted to management are the best subject matter experts. They're high performers. They, are great consultants. Then one day they find themselves in a management position where they're supposed to lead people, but no one's given them any training and they have zero experience on what that looks like. So I've long thought that, I work with a couple guys from the Army, and they're the opposite, right? They don't learn any technical skills, but they learn tons of leadership
Right.
skills. Whereas we learn a lot of technical skills and no leadership skills. And if we could somehow merge those to identify, like, fledgling leaders a little earlier in the process, and then give those folks leadership skills and say, hey, look, this is how you're going to have to develop a team. And this is what it means to be a manager. Like, a
Right.
manager is not just a really good consultant. It's a manager of
Yep.
people and leadership. So
Yeah.
probably a topic for a different day, but that's always
Yeah.
been something in the back of my mind that we need to work on as an industry.
Yeah. And it's a desire thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's one
For
thing that
sure.
it gets sideways because you can teach how to consult and you can teach the soft skills. You can teach the tech skills. You can't teach the mindset. You can't teach the desire. Those things just don't
Yeah.
necessarily flow.
And it's hard for the ego to take a step back and be like, look, I don't want to be a manager. Like, I'm
Oh
happy
yeah,
being a
totally.
really good consultant. Like, anyone who can do that, I'm impressed with. If you can do enough self-evaluation to opt out of management, that's interesting. Which, good segue. So in our industry, I guess the top that you can try to achieve, arguably, is becoming a CISO or a Chief Information Security Officer. And those look, I've seen folks who come from like a COO background or a CFO background that find themselves in the CISO position because they're great leaders. I've seen subject matter experts rise to the level of being a CISO. And what a CISO is, I think, is up for debate. At one organization, it might mean application security. At another organization, it might mean chief compliance officer. But I guess if you take the general CISO position, one of the questions that I always get asked from CISOs is like, what's the one thing I should focus on? Like, if there's a million different things I should focus on, like, where do I start? So I'll ask you, what's the biggest bang for a CISO's buck if they want to start somewhere?
Sales and marketing. And what I mean by that is that in a CISO's position, you can generally support yourself with a staff of subject matter experts that know the right thing to do. But it's all about selling that and being able to get buy-in across an organization to be able to get the resources you need to be able to do the thing that's the right thing to do from a best practice security perspective. So I know that's not where
Yeah,
you're going, I don't think. But that's
I think
what
that's great.
that's what I've seen as success. Like those individuals who can communicate what's on their agenda in the terms that the people they're communicating to can understand, are highly successful. They can build. It basically looks like a high performing organization because they always have the right funding and they always have the right support. And across the company, all the other organizations or divisions within the company are behind it and they get the mission. And it's that level of communication which is key. But if we're talking about technically speaking, what's one thing a CISO can do for the most bang for their buck? I'd say it's a little cliche. It's getting a little long in the tooth by now, but it's harden their internal Windows environments. A Windows Enterprise environment is a soft and chewy thing, if not hardened.
Yeah,
LLMNR, NetBIOS, any of the SMB security mechanisms, all of that stuff. I mean, it's like we used to make fun of it a little bit. It's like you can almost write a successful penetration testing report before you even do it in a
yeah.
lot of cases
I heard
because
that same.
there's a lot of the same that we see across the organizations that we've worked for.
So I want to talk about both of these. The first thing you said in this technical area, but I love what you said, sales and marketing. So one thing, I think that it is easy to fall in the trap as a security professional that you're the hammer and everything is a nail. So what I mean by that is the places that you're very tempted to start are security frameworks. Let's take on NIST or ISO or some security framework, or let's purchase some suite of tools that I've been promised will, alleviate all of my security problems. But to your point, I think the first thing to ask is my objectives should be the business's objectives. So what does my business want to do? Because sometimes security is about revenue generation. I have to, build a security program so that my partners feel good about using my SaaS platform. Other times it might be regulatory. Other times I might have some healthcare data that's, I can't lose at any cost. So I have to build a true security program. And I think understanding that will help you attach yourself to the positive business outcome of your team. Say, look, this
Yep.
is why we need this from a business perspective. This revenue generating. This is a deal breaker from us if we lose data. And that's what business folks understand. Your sales team, your CFO, your CEO that is probably your project and budget sponsor, they're going to understand those consequences. If we don't do this, we're not going to be able to enter this market. And guess
Totally.
what? Budget materializes out of thin air. But it's so
Yeah.
attractive just to go straight to the framework or buy the
Yeah.
tool and
Well,
skip that step.
yeah, frameworks are good. Frameworks are, I always treated them like a reminder checklist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the things that one should be doing if you have a fully blown out security program. You can refer to a framework as you have a program that works for your business. You can refer to a framework as, oh, perhaps we should improve here because this is, something that was, that's in this common framework that we don't really address, right? We don't do it great. Something where we might want to, put some resources to. And it's a good checklist. It's a good reminder. It's a good refresher
Yep.
course even sometimes. But there was a guy that I worked with out at Rocky Flats. His name's Scott. Smart, smart guy. One of the smartest guys I've ever met, I'd like to say. but we were talking about risks and threats and vulnerabilities and things like that that are on our organization's network, or that we thought might be or whatever. And he boiled down. He said, "Hey, thing I'd be most scared of if I was, in a leadership position here at the bomb plant, which by the way is now closed, and so we're not really sharing. We're not sharing. We're not oversharing here. This is, yeah, this is all in the past. But he said I'd be worried if there was an internal threat that would basically change all of our findings for our radiological measurements off by one here and there. So they're not reproducible and they don't make sense. That would shut down our operations. We would never make our closure date. We would forfeit billions of, well, I don't know, millions, I guess. I wasn't in the know of what the bonus was to be able to close the bomb plant down by 2006. And it was just like the most devastating thing ever. And that was great insight into the power that security has if you put it in a business perspective. One of the other things that happened there is we had a very highly priced, or at least I thought at the time, assessment come out to work on our business recovery or disaster recovery and business continuity plan. One of the things is identifying what the criticalities of the systems are that are used at the plant site. They came back and they said, the training system, number one, most important system that you have at a plant site. And I swear to God, if my organization at the bomb plant would have said that, we'd have been laughed right out of there. But it turns out that the training system is attached to the things that allow people in through their, palm scans or whatnot, so they can go in and do the work of tearing the buildings down, packing them up in little containers and shipping them off to nuclear waste facilities. They were right. It was impressive, and that perspective also helped me lean towards what actually does matter. It's not communications, it's not uptime of the networks, it's the training system that's available at the door scanner, right?
Yep.
This is to just be able to ensure that people have the right training to be able to go into the building. So those are that's, I think security as an enabler also plays a role, as you'd mentioned. Sorry, I'm going on and on because this is a hot topic with me, right? It's aligning the security program to what the business is doing. Security as an enabler is huge too. Just like you said, anybody with a platform really needs to be able to demonstrate security, and not just through the SOC and SOC 2 type reports or compliance reports, but legitimately like the open door, right? Microsoft does internal red teaming, and they publicize that they do it, and they publicize that they do it frequently. They won't share you what the results are, but they will tell you all about their methodology and everything they do. In fact, you can find a lot of it online. It's great stuff to have that kind of transparency.
Yeah, I think it's just a mark of the times. Like everybody's trying to step up the game and the visibility. So you mentioned pen testing. So you've been in the game for a while now. What do you think if I'm shopping around, I'm a CISO or I'm a IT director and I'm looking for a good pen test firm? What are some of the hallmarks of a good pen test firm? Like, hey, these, let me start by saying this. Pen test firms come in a lot of shapes and sizes. There's some fantastic, amazing ones, and then there's some that are fly by night. They claim they're doing automated pen testing, but maybe you're really buying a vulnerability scan and it's not what you thought it was. I think that has created a lot of confusion in the marketplace. It's kind of hard to purchase this service, especially if you're not in the know or non-technical. Are there a few things that, like, if you're kind of coaching a CISO to, purchase a good firm or find a good partner, anything you would look for?
Well, there's a lot of word of mouth, right? If you're looking for, for an organization that does really good work, it's a small industry. Penetration testing is one of those things that everybody has to do. So there's always trusted advice, right? Getting it from individuals you know. But looking for a top-notch penetration testing company, I'd say it's one that I've been involved with. No, I'm kidding. Either present or past or future. No, it's from what makes a good penetration testing company and things to look out for. First of all, quality of sample reports. If the sample report does not make you feel warm and fuzzy, your actual report is not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy. It's got to be a high quality deliverable, because that one piece of paper, like it's delivered on paper anymore, but that deliverable is the thing that you're left with as a buyer. It's what you got. It's like no matter how cool the experience was, oh, these guys were awesome and they were able to root these things up and show us this and demonstrate that, yada yada yada. 6 months down the road, you have this report. And if you don't have an ongoing relationship, that's all you have. So if you don't feel right looking at their sample work, you're not going to feel right looking at their ongoing work. So that's
Yeah,
that's definitely one.
yeah. I kind of think of it almost like some of the stuff you were mentioning earlier about hiring a full time pen tester. It's like, do they have a GitHub repo that you can review? Are they putting out thought
Yeah,
leadership? Do they have research projects? Do they have references that you can speak to? Some of that stuff's hitting me as you're speaking. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff I think that you can use to kind of vet a pen test firm.
yeah. So with that creativity in mind, with a good pen tester in my perspective, is a real creative person. That real creative person has an outlet for their creativity. So looking at organizations that have an R&D capacity, that make the investments, that provide the resources, which is mostly time, for their engineering teams to be able to explore the things that could be possible to help automate answers to problems, because penetration testing has always been a pretty manual approach, but it
Yeah.
certainly benefits from lots of automation, because just like we were talking about earlier, before I was talking about, was sometimes you can write the report before you even start the engagement. Well, there's a lot of things that sort of feed into one another, and there's been a lot of automation, a lot of impressive automation that's been done over the years. But there's always room for more discovery and more research and those kinds of things, and being able to support that, like you said, a GitHub, right? Does a company have an R&D capability? Do they actually publish information? Do they give back to the community? Are they making themselves better? Are they providing a place where their super smart people can go make themselves super smarter, right? That's the kind of thing that's a good sign of what kind of quality you're going to get based on the investments the organization makes.
Yeah, for sure. Are there like tools? Are there things that you're excited about? Because like I know pen testing is largely up to the creativity of the pen tester. Outside of some of the scanning stuff, there's a lot of network monitoring tools. Um, to me, there's no clear sign that security is going to go away. I mean, this is a problem that's here to stay. It feels like there's blockchain that people talk about. There's decentralization that's maybe interesting. There's zero trust environments. There's a lot of stuff out there. Is there anything that kind of excites you in the world of security tech that you think is interesting?
Excites me and scares the crap out of me all at the same time. And AI, right? So looking at all of the artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff, um, that's that's going on. If you throw quantum computing in there, I'll start sounding like a conspiracy theorist. But looking at the AI side of it, there's a lot of things that are quite promising. But it is also my opinion that right now it's a little premature. Solutions that are coming out that are AI, unless the A means algorithm, it's
Yeah,
it's the AI doesn't quite get there. Um,
yeah,
so I think it holds huge promise for the future, but I think right now there are a lot of things that are just a bit not not quite polished.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that is on my mind too is with all of this new tech coming out, is you have to take into consideration that there's still organizations that have like mainframe and AS400 you know systems that are big.
Yeah,
Some of the big Fortune 500, or they have a traditional AD network. They're just now transferring to the cloud, or So we have everything in between. We have the young startups who are born and forged in the cloud and all the modern tech ecosystem, and then you have some organizations that are on legacy equipment and maybe considering moving to the cloud, and that creates this unique environment where there's no single solution when it comes to security. And you had mentioned a while back that the identity piece of it, as people are moving from like on-prem to the cloud, it kind of keeps you up at night. You want to talk about that, like companies moving to the cloud and the unique threat environment there?
yeah. Well, moving out of a traditional enterprise environment, right? Which there is a lot of these hybrid organizations that have a pseudo traditional enterprise environment, and most of their systems are at the cloud, and they're using federated identities and all this other stuff to be able to help tie it together. It's the help tie it together. There is no real defined, or that's a terrible statement. There isn't a well defined method to be able to tie these things together without some of the legacy technologies that you would have on a traditional enterprise network. Um, that's that said, there's a lot of new solutions as well. I mean, being able to tie, like you were talking about, identities, identity management through federated identities that are not your traditional, say, Active Directory environment, that are tied together through SSO and SAML, and being able to provision across a variety of different vendor systems that are SaaS platforms, in an automated fashion using SAML and what's the other one? SCIM, I think it is. If I got that right. But that's, being able to provision roles and things like that. It's come a long way, because it was quite patchwork
Yep.
10 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever. How old is the cloud? 2006-ish was pretty much what I
It's,
remember. I mean, how
it's a
old do you think?
teenager. Yeah,
How?
I
Yeah,
call it a teenager. That's
yeah.
my catch-all. It's like somewhere between 13 and 19.
That's all right. I got 15, so yeah, and back then it was challenging, and plus
Yeah,
there weren't that many solutions. And as the solutions exploded, then it's like tying all this stuff together feels a little afterthoughty, right? And it's always said
yeah,
security
definitely.
shouldn't be an afterthought; it should be baked in. Well, you can't bake it in across a bunch of different providers. You can come up with a couple of different standards, and then those sort of are the way to go. It's I think it's a challenge to be able to get there, particularly with the fact that I mean, the one thing I was just picking on right there is identities, right? Identity is the new perimeter, so they say.
Hmm.
I think I'm stealing someone else's quote there. Whoever it is, I wish I could give you props for it. Somebody said it at one time, and they're right. With identities, the new perimeter, it's even more important to be able to get this right, to be able to centrally manage it, centrally audit it for sure,
Yeah,
and be able to build your organization around it, or build it around your organization. Not sure which.
it's tough.
The
Yeah, I mean
chicken
the
and
whole
egg question.
transition. Yeah, I mean it's like I don't know. The legacy to new stuff's always hard because you have backwards compatibility. There's just a million things, and that's one of the reasons I don't see this problem going away or getting much easier. So I'm going to shift gears totally. And I wanted to, I don't know if you know anything about this, Mike, if you have any background or insight, but if you do, I think it'd be cool
I got a
to talk a
curveball.
little
Here we
bit.
go.
Yeah, well, it's not a curveball, but so I think one question that comes up, and I don't really know the answer to, I've done some research on this, is, people imagine hackers in the hoodie, kind of thing, or the guy in the basement. Um, but there's clearly nation states. There's one-off practitioners. There's insider threats. But from your experience, so you've been around this for quite a while, and been involved in incidents, or at least kind of helped manage those before. From your experience, who are the hackers, if you will? Is it typically nation states? Is it one-off individuals? Some combination? Who are they?
Well, that's a good question, right? When we talk about nation states and things that are actually organized by a nation, I guess
Yeah,
that's it's first of all, it's hard for me to comprehend. Second of all, attribution is really hard in
yeah,
cybersecurity, as we all know, right? I mean, I've been doing incident response in some capacity or another for 20 years, and being able to actually identify the who behind what the attacker was is really hard. There are companies that have been doing this for a really long time and putting together things that look like profiles of certain kinds of attackers that have, cute names like Fancy Bear or whatever that are doing a specific thing, but they don't know really who they are. They believe that they're nation state actors, but not really. So is it organized crime? Is it something that's well funded that can put a bunch of people together to perform one thing? Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is really an organized group. I'll give you an example here, a topical example. Oh shoot, what is it? What's the name? The Reddit, Wall Street Bets,
yeah, yep,
right? That looks like it was a big organized financial thing, but you know what it was? It was a couple of posts out to Reddit. That's it, and it drove the price of a stock through the roof, and it became national news, right? Is that similar to the groundswell of these groups of criminals, cyber criminals, being able to come together? Is it sort of organized crime? I guess. It's hard to say. There's quite a lot of it. The one thing I will say that I have never seen corporate espionage. I've never seen one company hack another. The only thing I've ever heard about are things that I wouldn't even consider hacking. Um, oh man, it was a long time ago. A long time ago, there was the Houston Astros they were involved in a scandal because they gained access to someone else's database. They gained access to the database because it didn't require a password. So it's like, is that really hacking if somebody doesn't actually secure
It's just
something, right?
go
Yeah,
into it. Yeah.
it's it's like they hacked them by looking up what was available. It's kind of an interesting thing, but I've never seen a case that I know of off the top of my head of one organization being found guilty of attacking another organization. But that's a huge thing. But it's huge to keep in mind for sure. Um, One thing that I will mention is there was a company. The closest thing that I saw this was there was an organization that did. It was a service organization. I'm going to be pretty vague here, but they did a lot of things for a bunch of different companies from a management and distribution perspective. They had some really big clients. They held on to some technology to help some of their biggest clients activate their products. Um, they thought that they were just activating products and they're shipping things and they're getting things from one place to the other and they're fulfilling orders and whatever. Turns out that little piece of technology was hugely valuable to the hacker or to the underground community that wanted access to these systems. So basically, the lesson in that was that all of their customers, adversaries, were who they need to protect their own operations from. They like inherited the threat of everything from like a dairy farm to a tech provider to everything. It's like anybody who had anything out for any of those organizations was going to be looking to infiltrate this company because of their position in the supply chain. It was
You're right.
yeah, it was huge. It was greatly eye opening.
Yeah, I like the Wall Street bets analogy you gave because I read some research on this recently that said outside of like perhaps nation states, like if China or someone has a part of the military doing it or something like that, that it's kind of organized in like loose hives where maybe people are contracted out or maybe you kind of know someone from an online presence so you group together to do something, but it wasn't like people sitting in an office building typically
Right.
plotting something. It was kind of like a loose connection of each other, which made it notoriously difficult to prosecute anyone or stop it from happening. And I think the
Yep.
Wall Street bets thing is probably not unlike what's happening in the commercial side of the unethical hacking
Yeah.
equation.
But instead of finding it on Reddit, you find it on the dark web.
Yeah, Tor or
Tor.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually think that one of the perhaps bigger threats is corporate America in some ways when it comes to privacy, because one of the things that we have done is uh, we acted before we thought should we act. The old saying. So you look at like social media and stuff; they're collecting everything and then throwing ads at you. And now regulations are coming down, and we're trying to think: should we be doing this? Do data subjects have rights? Should they be collecting all of this? So when it comes to privacy, I always like to ask folks like you: are there certain are there apps or things that you use or don't use that you're like, because you're privacy and security conscious, that I talked to Ryan Baisden, which is one of our pen test guys, and he has like Graphene OS on his Droid device and doesn't use any of the normal operating systems. Is there anything like that that you do that you use or avoid?
You know what? It sounds funny. It sounds hypocritical, but I don't have that high a standard. However, I operate very skeptically.
Yeah.
So from my personal operations, what the technologies that I have, within my house, my personal devices, things like that, I don't, I'm not an early adopter. I'm not someone who's going to jump out and grab the latest technology and try to leverage it to whatever
Yep.
use it is. But I'm going to use it, and I find that that's the usefulness of technology outweighs the privacy need. We hear lots about privacy, but man, I tell you, when out of maybe it's just the people I hang out with, but out of anybody I talk to, I am stunned at how little they really care about privacy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I was on a Zoom call a while ago, and it was kind of a happy hour situation. It said, "Oh, let's all play Among Us." It's like, "Well, what's Among Us?" "Oh, just go download it." Really? That was it. It was just like, okay, cool, it sounds fun. And then bam, everybody downloads it, figures out how to play Among Us, and it was actually kind of fun. But the point is, it was fun. Did it have privacy concerns? Sure as heck could have. I mean, that's just one perfect example of just download an app from somewhere and just, yeah, trust me, right? It's because I think there's your average Joe doesn't really care, and your average Joe probably wouldn't want to deal with any of the pain in the neck of trying to maintain privacy and security, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
There was a guy I knew who said he likes to live like his information is already compromised. So he said, if I do that, then when the inevitable happens, yeah, it'll be no big change. So, well, how do you do that? He goes, yeah, I'm going to go off the grid. Well, that doesn't help, right? That's kind of like the polar opposite. That's like coming full
Yeah.
circle on the not caring anymore to making it impossible.
Is there anything you think we can do to like get the average Joe to care more? Like, you think it's just like public, like getting into the social consciousness, or you think there's anything that can be done, or you think this is just kind of what we have to accept?
I don't know. I think given the how many people are on the planet and how many people have access to technology and how ubiquitous can access to this information become, right? I think the odds are against us. I think
Yeah.
having a looking at generations to come. That's spoken like an old man, isn't it? But looking at my kids who've had some kind of a device in their hand since they were 5 or so,
Yep.
I think that there's going to be a different perspective on this as we get there, because it's going to be a greater impact on what happens when you lose access to something or some of your information is, something bad happens. And those formative lessons early on, I think, is going to help change how that operations perspective. Like I said, when I operate quite skeptically, I figure that we're going to probably see that as well in the next generations of technology users.
Yeah, I agree that I think there's perhaps two saving graces. One is it seems like everything's a cycle. So I'm on my phone a lot and addicted to technology like a good millennial should be. But my daughter calls me out on it all the time. She's like, "Dad, why are you on your phone?" Like, even if I'm just looking at the time, because when I get home, I try to be pretty good about not having it. So part of me wonders if like her generation is going to rebel against the
Oh,
phone and the
nice.
technology. So maybe there's something like that. Maybe we'll get a new cycle where they're like putting it down, and our technology overlords no longer rule us in that generation. The other thing that gives me some hope is I was doing a podcast with one of our privacy fellows. His name's Phil Brudney, and there's this new way of looking at privacy that some organizations are taking called the fiduciary standard. And the idea being, if you have a financial advisor, they're trusted with your money and they're supposed to make the right decisions by you and act in your best interest at all times. And the idea is, if you view data as a digital asset, then all the companies who collect it should be acting in your best interest and be held accountable for it. And asking, should they do this? And if you could somehow either self-regulate or maybe with formal regulation enforce that, there could be something done there. I don't know how that's going to shake out yet, but I like that people are thinking about it. So maybe we have some
Yeah,
hope.
yeah. I mean, it's good, but there's also the, what does in your best interest mean? What kind of usage are you?
Oh
What are
yeah.
you going to forego if you don't actually allow the sharing?
Yep.
It's like the cookie things. When all the privacy regulations went through, it's like, oh, the
Yep.
site uses cookies. Do you want to accept our cookies, or would you like to break the internet? Well, if I
Yeah,
think I'll
exactly.
accept your
You want to
cookies
use
and
my
whatever,
website?
track me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think there needs to
Cool.
be another layer to that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So last question. So I have the opportunity to talk to like a lot of people on a mentor basis or folks looking for jobs, college students, that kind of thing. And a lot of folks want to break into security, which is great because, like we said earlier, there's a big talent shortage. And for some reason, it seems like there's this weird area where it's hard to break into the security industry, but once you're in there, you have your choice of jobs. So if you had to start over and you're 20 years old, coming out of college, or even considering if you're going to go to college and you wanted to get into security, um, what would you focus on? How would you get in the door? Are there new technologies, things that you would kind of coach that person to focus on from a security perspective?
If I was 20 years old again, So if I was 20 years old again, I probably would have given up the hair metal cover band scene in Albuquerque and went to the country band scene, maybe learn some banjo. But if I was 22 today, what would I do to be able to get into security? Well, there are a lot of tracks that are made for security. We see degrees, masters in having a security focus uh, in in higher ed, and I think that's amazing because back in the day that didn't really exist. Management information systems degree from 1991 is entirely worthless now, right? I mean, it's just some of those things that it was kind of worthless then, but now with security being able to be within higher ed curriculums, I think it's a great launching point. But in order to actually break in, there's a level of acceptance, right? I mean, I started as a network analyst because I thought, hey, if I play my cards right, I can actually break into things and hack, sort of, to be able to test the defenses of yada yada yada. But being able to take that step and understand that there's an entry level position within security, and sometimes that's a little brutal. That's something I think it's sort of taking the bad with the good,
Yeah.
because it can give you that career in security. And once you're in security, I don't think you ever leave.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's no reason
Yeah.
to. I always tell people like it's kind of one of those who you know things too. It's like don't undervalue networking, talking to folks like yourself and our team on campus, and sometimes that's all you need to get into the door. But that's not security specific. That's anything.
Yeah.
Awesome.
True.
Well, that was all of my questions. Thanks, Mike. That was
You
awesome.
bet.
Great conversation.